Welcome back everyone. If you've been playing Common Ground World for a while, then you've probably made sushi boats before because they have been one of the most competitive items to make in several competitions, in particular the Anything Goes meta. But this upcoming competition is not an Anything Goes meta, it actually is a sushi boat competition. So sushi boats is what you're gonna have to make in order to be competitive for this upcoming competition, which is gonna be happening on April 23rd, 2024. I'm gonna go over the details for this competition, and then I have yet another sushi boat build showcase prepared to hopefully give you an idea on how to create a competitive design for this upcoming competition. As always, you can find the official details in the Common Ground World announcements channel in the Gala Games Discord, and you can find an invite link to the Gala Games Discord in the description of the video. So the competition begins April 23rd, 2024, and it ends 3 days later. Meta is to sell sushi boats. Trade time is 120 seconds and 1 gasoline. So 2 minutes per trade is actually a long time. More than likely you are going to have more than one trade vehicle in order to sell multiple items at the same time. Biome is going to be a forest biome facing north. The biome edges is a forest on the north side, river on the east and south sides, and an ocean on the west side. It did provide us with a picture of the starting town, so you start off with several ponds, rice fields, a farmer, a silo, and even a mixing tent. So the mixing tent is a very expensive building. It costs 550,000 in order to build a mixing tent. They also start us off with a warehouse, worker house, and wind turbine. We have everything we need to make energy as well as white rice. White rice requires 1 energy and 4 rice husk. And the reason they start us off with white rice is because that is what is cash boosted for the competition. White rice will sell for 4,800 each. So you may think white rice is the way to go in order to get all the cash that you need, but the problem is that white rice is very difficult to scale up because you'll need to build more mixing tents, and like I said, these mixing tents are really expensive. They're 550,000 each, so it's going to take a long time in order to scale up white rice production if you were to do that. So I don't recommend doing that. What I do recommend, as usual, is to go for a gold rush, and this gives you a perfect opportunity to do that because since you're not going to be using the mixing tent for the gold rush, you can just sell it, and that's going to give you a little over 130,000 extra cash to start off with. You can also sell these ponds, and you already have the setup that you need to start making energy in the meantime, which you will need the energy in order to build the forges. So you'll build several forges, and then the gold panning sites, the panner house, the ore storage, basically everything you'll need to get started with your gold rush. You do have the 2 rivers to help you out with the passive water requirement for those gold panning sites, as well as any trees if you happen to need more trees. We start off with a lot of trees anyway, so that won't be an issue at the start. Just be careful not to place the gold panning sites close to the ocean side. But yes, I do recommend going for a gold rush to get all the cash that you need for your sushi boat design, because you are going to need a lot of cash. So don't be afraid to take up the entire town space for the gold rush. If you have no idea how to do that, I do have a video on a gold rush design that I've made that takes up the entire town space. I will leave a link to that video in the description. The rewards for this competition are the standard gala rewards for getting in the top 1,200 placements in the leaderboard. And as the announcements say, the craft requirements for sushi boats are 2 salmon nigiri, 1 eel nigiri, 1 rice vinegar. It is crafted in the sushi restaurant. It is stored in the storehouse, and it has a craft time of 30 seconds. The NFT releasing alongside this competition is called the Sakura Gourmet. This is a legendary NFT that is placed down in your town and acts like a sushi restaurant, but way better. It allows you to craft anything that the sushi restaurant can craft, such as salmon nigiri, eel nigiri, and sushi boats. It comes with 3 workers instead of 1, so they're able to help you gather all the ingredients that you need much quicker. Wages are the same at 1,200 per minute. It only casts 1 shade instead of the regular building casting 2 shade. It still does require a road, but the best utility it has is that it provides a 50% craft time reduction to all of the crafts that allow you to make eel and salmon through any method. So what I mean by that is there's 3 different methods to making salmon, either the wild net fishing or the fishing platform or the advanced fishing platform NFT. So all of those methods will have a 50% craft time reduction whenever this NFT is placed down in your town. This utility does not stack, so there's not much point in having more than one of this NFT placed in your town. It is a global effect, so you can place it anywhere. It doesn't have to be next to the fishing platforms. That doesn't matter. So this is priced at $400. There's an initial supply of 500 available in the Gala game store. It's already available. And my thoughts on this NFT is, well, yeah, the utility is great for sushi boat competitions. I think it's very meta specific. You're not going to use this NFT for very many other situations other than that. There is one thing though. I do know that there are people out there that do something called a salmon rush, where they have the NFTs that are required in order to quickly craft salmon, and they're able to sell that for a pretty good amount of cash. So if you are one of the people that execute a salmon rush, then this NFT will make a huge difference to that, potentially even doubling your production rate. If you do a salmon rush as part of your cash rush strategy, then I think this NFT is like a must buy. But if you don't do that, then you're not going to use this NFT that much other than for sushi boat competitions, which we have done several times. I don't know how many more times we would do a sushi boat competition. When it comes to sushi boat competitions, this NFT is a huge help. So I do have mostly good things to say about this, but just keep in mind, if you don't do salmon rush, then you're not going to be using this that often. Well, this usually doesn't happen. So I'm about to go into the build showcase to show you how well the sushi boat build is doing, but I'm experiencing a connection issue. So I'm going to have to refresh the page, which is going to reset the production monitor. So I'm not going to be able to give you a good look on the production monitor, unfortunately, and I'm not going to wait around, or else this video is going to get delayed. But I can reassure you that I have run this build for at least 7 hours now. You're still able to see the production monitor over there, and it is doing 73.5 sushi boats per hour. That is the rate. It stabilized that. The rate is going down now because I got a connection issue just now. I'm going to talk more about the production monitor after I refresh the page right here. Well, that was a little unfortunate, but it could be worse. Now I'm going to show you how this build is doing, I suppose. So like I said, 73.5 sushi boats per hour. Not much point in scrolling through the production monitor now, unfortunately. But the bottleneck for this build that's stopping it from doing more than 73.5 sushi boats per hour is the salmon. So if you were to increase, or if I were to increase the salmon production here, which would then increase the salmon nigiri production, then I can make more sushi boats. Actually, I would also need to make more eel nigiri, but eel nigiri is not that much of an issue. This build isn't like perfectly optimized. I do believe that it is possible to do close to or up to 100 sushi boats per hour without utilizing any NFTs if you were to optimize it as much as possible. I think it would require more seaweed farms, maybe more shrimp farms, more than likely 2 more fish farms to increase the eel production rates. I don't think it would require more rice fields than this. No, actually, this is enough rice fields to potentially make 100 sushi boats per hour. So I think the rice field quantity is good. So there's a couple of more buildings that I could have made. Like, these builder houses don't need to be here. You do have more space to improve this, like to add more relevant buildings, but you would have to figure out how to balance it properly, which is the thing. Balancing takes time. It's not as easy as just placing down a seaweed farm and the production goes up. It requires testing to make sure everything is balanced well enough so that your storages don't get jammed, or if your storages are getting full too quickly, you'll need to sell a lot of excess items, which means you'll consume more gasoline. You could potentially run out of gasoline, and then you'll be screwed. So you do have to be careful with the adjustments, but I made enough adjustments to get this to 73.5 sushi boats per hour, which I believe is competitive enough to place in the top 1200 in the competition. But this has room for improvement. It definitely does. Now, the wild net fishing here, I have a lot of them actually. I have 25 and I'll go more in depth once I'm explaining the production of everything, but I'm not actually using all of them. All the ones over here, these 6 or maybe 7 of them, I don't think they ever get used. Most of my fish chum, all of my fish chum actually goes in these 2. So that's why the fishermen usually take it to these wild net fishing since it's closer. So they never touch these since these are the most far away ones. But if you were to increase the fish chum production, then they would use the ones over here. So with the wild net fishing that I have here, I believe that is enough wild net fishing to get all the salmon that you would need to potentially hit 100 sushi boats per hour. So if you're not planning on hitting 100 sushi boats per hour, you don't need these. Now for this design, you would still need that nuclear power over here because that's providing passive energy to a couple of these tents. But then again, you could probably switch some things around. It is still providing passive energy to these wild net fishing as well, so you'll need those anyways. Hopefully that information helped you out or gave you ideas on how to further improve this. I'm going to start by explaining salmon production. So you're going to want seaweed farmers in order to pick up seaweed from the seaweed farms. I do have 8 seaweed farmers and I do have 9 seaweed farms. The seaweed farms are positively impacted by Sandy. That's why I have them right next to the ocean. They all have the 2 passive water that they need from these 3 ponds that I have built. Seaweed gets stored in the silos, of which I have 3 of, but only these 2 should be getting seaweed. Then I have 9 aquaculturist houses, which are in charge of picking up the seaweed and taking it to the shrimp farms as well as the fish farms, which I'll talk about later. There are 9 shrimp farms. These will of course craft shrimp and take them to the closest seafood warehouse, of which I have 3 of them. Most of the shrimp should just be going to these 2, while this one should only ever get salmon if it ever does get salmon. Just to talk a little bit more about the seafood warehouse, they are quite difficult to build as they require ice blocks. If you don't know how to get ice blocks, I do have a video covering the ice block craft and the cold proximity effect, and I'll leave a link to that video in the description. So the shrimp are used in the mixing tents to make fish chum. I have 6 mixing tents that are making the fish chum, and the fish chum is also stored in the seafood warehouse, picked up by the fishermen, which I have 5 fishermen houses spread around the town here. They pick up the fish chum and take it to the wild net fishing, of which I have 25 of those. That requires 1 fish chum and 3 energy in order to make salmon. So all of them have passive energy from the 3 nuclear power that I have for this build, which is one of the most expensive things of this build. Now it does have to be nuclear power because if I were to use power plants, it would cast dirty on them, which slows down the wild net fishing, which makes it not efficient to do. So that's why it has to be nuclear power in order to make this as efficient as possible. That's the entire crafting process for salmon. So next I'm going to explain white rice and rice vinegar. White rice requires tractors, of which I have 8 of, and they will pick up the rice husk from the rice fields. It's actually called husk rice. So there are 15 rice fields. They all have the 8 water that they require in order to grow the husk rice, but they do need 10 water in order to build the rice fields. Just remember that in case you get confused whenever you're building these out. They get stored in the silo. Most of the husk rice should be going to this silo, and they are used in the mixing tent in order to craft white rice. So there are 9 mixing tents crafting white rice. They all have the 1 passive energy that they need from either the nuclear power or the nearby power plants, and that makes white rice, which is also used in the 2 sauce facilities I have right here in order to craft rice vinegar. Now this also requires sugarcane, so I have a 1 sugarcane field right here, which is impacted by 1 shade. This gives me 80 sugarcane per hour, which potentially maxes out my rice vinegar at 80 per hour. If I wanted to make more rice vinegar, let's say I was aiming for 100 sushi boats per hour, I would want to make another sugarcane field over here where it's going to be on a red craft timer, and this will help me get my sugarcane production to 100, which would then help me get my rice vinegar production to 100. So that's one of the things you would have to do if you were trying to improve the rice vinegar production for your final sushi boat production rates. Both of these sauce facilities have the 2 passive water that they need because they're getting 1 water from the river and also 1 water from these ponds over here. Now I'll explain eel production. So I have 2 worm farms and they are crafting worms, of course. The tractors are in charge of taking husk rice to the worm farms. If your tractors are not doing that, that's because you need more tractors, because this will be prioritized last with the addition of wasabi, I believe. So yeah, if your tractors are not taking care of the worm farms or the wasabi farms, you do not have enough tractors, so just add another tractor. So the worms are stored in the storehouse. So I have 8 fish farms. 4 of them are making roe, and those only require 1 seaweed, and then the other 4 are making eel. These require food mix, which are crafted in the mixing tent. I have 2 mixing tents crafting food mix, and food mix is stored in the seafood warehouse. And that's the entire process for crafting eel. And now with all of that explained, you can make sushi boats. So I have 9 sushi restaurants. These 3 are making eel nigiri, and that also requires wasabi, which I haven't explained. So I have 2 wasabi farms for that. They have the 3 passive water that they need, and also they're positively impacted by shade, so you need to have them in a spot with at least 3 shade. That's why I have them right here. They're stored in the nearby silo and then picked up by the sushi restaurant workers in order to make the eel nigiri. So these 3 are making eel nigiri. Then I have the 3 over here making salmon nigiri. These restaurants have the 3 passive energy that they need, and the 3 in the middle are the ones making the sushi boats, picking up the eel and salmon nigiri that I just made, as well as the rice vinegar. So that's how you make sushi boats. Quite a lot involved, but one of the hardest parts in this is all of the cash that you will need in order to build this, and you can't make any mistakes because those mistakes will be really expensive. But there is a lot of stuff you have to balance, especially with the seaweed and the husk rice, because if you make too much of that, you'll end up using a lot of gasoline and potentially either running out of gasoline or jamming up your silos, and then the entire process will fail. So there's a couple other things that I still need to explain. Gasoline production, I'm using the standard gasoline production with 2 water pumps, 2 power plants, refinery in between those crafting gasoline, the refinery to the side crafting petroleum. Since there's no oil seep to provide passive crude oil, I am using oil pumps. I have a total of 6 oil pumps. The crude oil is picked up by the 1 forklift right here and taken to the fuel storage, just the 1 fuel storage. For the trade setup, I have 2 trade depots on the northeast corner. Other things to explain, as you can see, I have tree farms here. You don't need wood or lumber in the end. This is just for the sake of getting the wood or lumber that you may possibly need to finish up any buildings at the end, because you won't have that much space for trees. But you could also, get rid of these rice fields for temporary tree farms. In particular, there's some spots with 10 waters, such as these 2 spots. You could easily replace those for tree farms and then replace them back with rice fields, since they already have the 10 water that you need in order to build the rice fields. But I also have 3 wells here that are meant to help you with getting the water that you need to build these other rice fields, as well as any ponds if you haven't built them all. These tree farms and wells are not required, they're just optional. And same thing with these builder houses, of course, optional, since I'm not using those spots. And same thing with the logger. Obviously the logger is there to help you pick up the wood from the tree farms, that is optional. Lumber mill to make lumber if you need it, and the lumber yard to store your lumber or wood if you need it to build any other buildings, or even oak wood, since some of these buildings require oak wood in order to build. So there's quite a couple of spots that I'm just not using, which gives you some good space to further improve this design, as well as these 2 spots, which I could have easily added 2 more seaweed farms, but it would have been overproducing seaweed, and that would have thrown off the balance unless I tweaked other things, which I wasn't going to have enough time to, further improve this design. But I think where it's at, it provides a very good place to be at while still having space to improve it. For auto trade, I have most of the items here with an auto trade quantity of 10, with the exception of seaweed, that is at 20. Here's what the build looks like on the visualizer. Total cost is 58.5 million cash, but keep in mind this doesn't include the cost of setting up the process of getting the steel to build the nuclear power, or the cost of setting up the process to get the ice blocks for the seafood warehouses. Both of those processes will cost you upwards of 10 million extra cash. So to be on the safe side, including some extra cash for wages, you're gonna want 70 million in order to finish the entire process, which is going to take a while. Wages are 38,750 per minute, but once you're making and selling sushi boats, you will have no issue paying those wages. You can find the file to this visualizer on my Discord server, and an invite link to the Discord server is in the description of the video. No NFTs are required in order to reach this production rate, and that's everything I have for the build showcase. So I hope you found this helpful or informative. Feel free to leave a like, leave a comment, consider subscribing if you haven't done so. If you want to help support the channel, you can find links on the description on how to do so. As always, I appreciate your support and thank you for watching.